My dear friends, today we've got an insane update. It's been 2 years since The Acolyte first premiered on Disney Plus, and yet we're still talking about this show. Most Star Wars series these days just come and go, and the second the finale ends, everyone moves on. Even with the recent and pretty darn great Maul Shadow Lord. It was such a big deal when it aired, but the day after the first season finished, most of the discussions completely faded out. I guess you can say the same about so many other projects, be they animated or live action. But with The Acolyte, against all odds, it's a very different situation. This is the only Star Wars live action show to date that's been officially cancelled. And I don't just mean it wasn't renewed and faded into obscurity, I mean literally Disney came out and said, we're not doing a season 2. But despite this, for good reasons and bad, it's still one of the most spoken about TV shows. While a lot of people use it as an example of the worst of this franchise, it still has a passionate fan base. There are still people out there advocating for a season 2, and amongst them is showrunner Leslye Headland. As the title suggests, she has struck back. She's given us her reflections, her regrets or lack thereof, and says that in spite of the show's cancellation, with Disney Plus focusing on the dark side with Maul Shadow Lord, she's not giving up hope that one day The Acolyte Season 2 will be made. So lots to talk about, and whether you love the show or you hate it, you can't deny that there are still so many unanswered questions, both out of universe like why was this thing so darn expensive, and in universe like what was in store for Yoda and Darth Plagueis. So today's news comes to us from Empire Magazine, and they say this. After The Acolyte was cancelled after just a single season on Disney Plus, fans were left with all kinds of questions. What was the deal with Mani Jacinto's dark and dangerous stranger? What would become of Amandla Stenberg's Osha after a turn to the dark side? And where would the teases of Darth Plagueis and Yoda have led? Without a second season, we'll never know. But fresh hope arose recently when it recharted on Disney Plus. And I did talk about this. The main reason The Acolyte saw a huge surge in viewership around the release of Maul Shadow Lord is the show autoplayed and was recommended after every single Maul episode. So in some ways, I guess people didn't have a choice. If they left their TV running, The Acolyte Episode 1 would play. It might not be the full explanation, but it's certainly part of it. But in light of this resurgence, Empire Magazine spoke to the showrunner Leslye Headland, and she now expresses that after a break from Star Wars, she's ready to return to make that season 2. The originally planned second and third seasons have been scrapped. Her only hope, of course, is now the fact that Dave Filoni's in charge of Lucasfilm. It's not a comfortable truth for a lot of fans, but Dave was heavily involved in the creation process of this show. I imagine he's someone who would have wanted a season 2. So maybe, if Dave tried to negotiate with Disney and really push for it, one day there might be some kind of continuation. Although my guess is that it's not going to be in the same format. There is no way Disney is going to repeat the same mistake, invest a ridiculous amount of money for another failed season. So maybe some kind of Sith-oriented film, some kind of descendant connection with the Knights of Ren in the post-Episode 9 projects, or an animated show. Like I've said before, if they ever decide to do Tales of the Sith, Athena Portillo recently confirmed they are working on some mysterious and unannounced animated shows, so maybe one of them does have some kind of connection to The Acolyte. But in terms of doing a season 2, it doesn't look very likely. In spite of this, here are Leslye Headland's new comments. I would still want to do it, absolutely. As more people discover it, I think people may want to see some form of the story come back. Headland says there was no confusion and no ambiguity on where she wanted to go next. She says there was so much we wanted to do. Tying in the lore to the sequel, she says, this is no doubt the stuff that concerns the origins of the Knights of Ren, getting into who exactly Mani's character is, his connection with Venestra, his connection with Plagueis, and then his connection with other sequel-established things. So not just the Knights of Ren, but maybe something in relation to the Force Dyad. Before Rey and Kylo, a similar kind of bond may have existed between Osha and May. Even if the latter's mind has been wiped, at the end of the season she was starting to remember her sister. Maybe they're bonded in the Force in ways we don't know yet. The Brendok witches might have had a version of this, but obviously because they're not Jedi or Sith, they didn't use terms like Force Dyad. Maybe it's something Chimere wanted to emulate, with Osha. I will admit, the Force Dyad stuff is rather messy. I'm not the biggest fan of this concept, but the one cancelled project that would have explored this in the most depth is The Hunt for Ben Solo. I'm sure that would have involved Rey connecting to Ben's Force ghost. But returning to Leslye Headland, she goes on to make a rather contentious statement, which I've seen making the rounds on social media, and a lot of fans are disagreeing with it. She says that in much the same way the prequel trilogy saw a renaissance, she believes that one day the Acolyte will similarly be better received. She advises Acolyte fans to not be dismayed, and says, quote, "The weather changes with Star Wars. There was a real negative reaction to the prequel trilogy, especially from a particular generation, and 25 years later, Hayden Christensen is at Celebration. Trust in the Force." It's a very similar line of rhetoric that sequel fans talk about, but it's been a good 11 years since The Force Awakens, we're coming up to 10 years of The Last Jedi next year, and it doesn't feel like anything has changed. I'm not saying it's impossible that the Acolyte is going to be better received in years to come, but when people compare these situations to the prequel trilogy, they weren't terrible to begin with. Even if, as she says, certain fans of maybe a particular generation didn't like those films, they were very solid stories with very strong themes, character archetypes, beloved characters, and it was a time before social media where general journalist backlash is what shaped a certain narrative. And while you could say there are similarities between that and the situation with the Acolyte, as it stands at the moment, it didn't get high enough viewership to be that beloved. I think it also helps that prequel resurgence and appreciation happened during the sequel trilogy. It was the 2010s, fans were rediscovering the video games like Battlefront, and they were hungry for more Star Wars content. And because the sequels weren't really cutting it, fans went back and realized that maybe they were too harsh to episodes 1 to 3. There was also a huge resurgence of prequel memes, and the generation who grew up with these films were becoming adults. They were expressing their love for these films online. Is that going to happen with an obscure show like The Acolyte? Definitely not to the same extent. And so the final comment from Leslye Headland is this. The Acolyte Season 1 was not supposed to be a week-to-week show. The best viewing experience involved seeing all 8 episodes at once. It was supposed to be binged. And my response to this is, if she had such a good rapport with Kathleen Kennedy, if the show is not supposed to be viewed episode to episode, why didn't she push for it to release in one go? Or maybe she did, and Disney Plus said no. And you know what, guys? She's right about this. When I was covering the show, obviously I watched the episodes week to week like you guys did, but when I did a rewatch, the episodes flowed so much better in one go, especially with episodes 3 and 7. Those were the Brendok episodes, which a lot of fans said felt like a repeat in many ways, but it actually makes a lot more sense when you binge the season all at once. But as I said, my friends, I think Leslye is out of luck on this. Things could change, crazy things have happened, but for the moment, I think a follow-up to The Acolyte is at the bottom of Lucasfilm's priority list. The next show coming out that focuses heavily on the dark side is More Shadow Lords Season 2. But what do you guys think? Do you think there's a chance The Acolyte ever gets a follow-up? Do you want to see one? It wasn't my cup of tea, but I have to admit, I love Plagueis, and I'd love to see what happens with Chimera. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.